Hello quilters, today I'm showing you how to do a cathedral windows quilt. You will just basically need squares all the same size. You will need oodles of squares for your background fabric. For each square you use, you're going to use 2 of the solids. Basically you press those in half, lay them over your scrap, and you're going to stitch those an 1/8 inch all the way around. This actually creates the melon, and you will join all of your squares together. You could also opt to do this in a flying geese pattern. You don't necessarily have to do it in a square pattern. I found this was the traditional method. This is how I wanted to go with mine. You sew those 4 together. Make sure you press with an iron in between. This is a lot of thickness that you're pressing, and it's really important to get that good press, because later on when you go to stitch the melons, those being pressed flat will not cause you problems. I have only finger pressed here, but please do use an iron. And here's the basic block. Again, press those seams with an iron. It will drastically help you later. And then this is where you can turn your melons. You can opt to put a scrap into this area, and then you're stitching down on those melons and stitching down that center square. You will have to pin your melons. Pin, pin, pin. Be careful that you don't stab yourself, especially when you're working larger pieces. As you combine these together, it does kind of get tricky, so you probably need to make sure your whole sewing table is completely cleaned off, otherwise you're going to just knock everything off. Here is my bigger piece. I'm going to go ahead and pin all of these melons, and if you'll look, the edge, I'm not going to pin anything on those because I will be adding to this row, and after you add to the row is when you add your center square, like I'm doing here. Right now I'm just pinning down the melons. If you pay attention in how you pin, you will be able to pin to where the pin will come out in the direction you need it to. Don't do like I do and pin them and then fight with it later. But you will stitch out your melon. And because I've done several of these, you can just do a continuous line of thread. You don't have to break your thread at each little diamond. You can continually jump from one to the next. Here I'm showing you how I'm stitching down a melon. It is at the edge, so it's not as finicky, but when you get to the center, the pieces are pretty cumbersome and it swings greatly on your table, so make sure your table's cleaned off. Make sure that the seams underneath are flat when you stitch this out. And I've just shown one melon that I've stitched, but I've stitched all of those. And I only had to break my thread twice. If you have to break your thread more, that's okay too. And here it is after I've stitched it. Notice the edges. This is the back. For those of you who are going to quilt this as you go, you would actually, before you stitch any of your melons down, would make your quilt sandwich and then stitch your melon as you're quilting. All you would have to do to this, you would not have to send it to a long armor and in effect be quilting it as you go. This quilt is pretty basic and pretty easy compared to other cathedral window patterns I've seen. Thanks for watching.